So tonight is October 21st, 2021. This is the first night of our Jataka session. So in this session, we'll look at Jatakas that dramatize some of the paramitas, three actually of the latter ones. The first six paramitas are dana, generosity, shila, morality, kshanti, patient forbearance, virya, vigor, jhana, meditation, prajna, non-dual wisdom. The seventh is upaya, skillful means, and that'll be tonight's Jataka. In it, the Bodhisattva is a god. Tomorrow night will be pranidhana, the eighth paramita, which is resolve, and a Jataka in which the Bodhisattva is an animal. And finally, we'll skip the ninth, which is bala, or strength, and Saturday night, we'll explore the 10th paramita, which is jnana, or knowledge, in which a Jataka in which the Bodhisattva is a human being. We've looked at these three Jatakas in earlier session, but I want to look at them again. As we mature, as we continue on in our practice, our view changes. And Zen reminds us of this. There's a wonderful verse, last year's poverty was not true poverty. Last year, there was room for a gimlet or an awl, sharp instrument to make a hole. This year, I can't even find the gimlet. So we'll begin then tonight with the Black Hound, the Hound Jataka, which is number 469 in the Pali collection of 547 such tales. And we'll start with a quote by Daniel Mendelsohn, who's a classicist, and he's speaking on the Odyssey and Odysseus. We don't have to decide whether he's admirable or not. It's his complexity that makes him worth thinking about. If he were all goody two-shoes and adorable and wonderful, the Odyssey would be about 10 pages long. So, in a long ago past life, the Bodhisattva came to life as Chakra, king of the gods. Shining with the radiance of the merit he'd acquired over lifetimes, he sat on a golden throne in great peace up in the vastness of space. Countless stars shimmered, galaxies glowed as the Bodhisattva peered down toward his old home, the earth far below. The sun's light poured down through space, glinting off seas, shining on clouds, gleaming on snow-capped mountains, and it was beautiful. But Chakra felt uneasy. His luminous senses expanded, and he felt the heat of war. He heard the bawling of calves, the yelping of dogs, the cawing of crows. He heard children crying and voices shouting in anger. He heard the weeping of the hungry, the lonely, and the poor. Tears fell from his eyes, showering the earth like meteors. He struck the arm of his throne with a radiant hand. "Something must be done," he said. And he called for his charioteer, the skillful god, Matali. "There is work for us down there," said Chakra, pointing to the earth. Then he suddenly transformed himself into a grim forester with a great horned bow in his hand and a quiver of arrows on his back. Matali, the charioteer god, became a black hound with tangled fur, crimson eyes, yellow teeth, a blood-red mouth and tongue. Then they leapt into the blackness of space, plummeting down from among the shining stars to land on the earth beside a great walled city. "Who are you?" called an astonished soldier from up on the wall. "A man of the forest, a hunter," said Chakra, "and this is my hound." The great hound opened its jaws. Smoke curled from deep in its throat. Its jaws opened wider, wider. The soldier felt like he was staring into a cauldron of blood and fire. "Bar the gates," shouted the soldier. "Bar them now." Quickly, the city's gates were shut and barred, but the huntsman and his hound leapt over the wall. The people of the city fled in every direction, the hound bounding hungrily after them, herding them like sheep. Men, women, and children fell to the ground and cried out in terror. "Hold," ordered Chakra. "Do not move. My hound is hungry. Feed my hound. Quaking with fear, the king of the city cried, bring food, bring it now. Wagons rolled into the market loaded with meat and bread, fruit and grain. The hound gobbled it all in a single gulp. My hound is hungry. Feed my hound, ordered Chakra, the Bodhisattva, more loudly still. Again, the wagons rolled. Again, the hound gobbled all the food in a single gulp. Then it opened its muzzle and howled a great howl of anguish, as if from the belly of hell. The people covered their ears in terror. Chakra plucked his bowstring, making a sound like thunder on a stormy night. He is hungry, he cried. Feed my hound. The king wrung his hands and wept. He has eaten everything. There's nothing left. Then said Chakra, my hound shall feed on the unrighteous, the greedy, selfish, and cruel. He shall devour hard hearts and consume those who lie, kill, and steal. If no righteous ones, no people with compassionate minds and hearts are found, he will gorge himself on forests, mountains, birds, and beasts. He will gnaw rocks, swallow rivers, tear your blazing sun and moon down from the blessed sky. My hound shall feed on you. Mercy, cried the terrified king and people. Mercy, we beg you, spare us and our world. Cease your endless fighting, said Chakra. Use your wealth to feed the poor, care for the sick, homeless, orphaned, and old. Teach your children kindness and courage. Respect the earth and its creatures. Care for one another and learn to be content. Your self-centered ways have gone unchecked far too long. Only when you have done these things will I leash my hound. Then the Bodhisattva, king of the gods, in the form of a grim forester, grew huge and blazed with light. The black hound leapt up, curling like smoke, as they rose together, up into the air, higher and higher. Down below, in the streets of the city, men and women looked up in dismay. They reached out their hands to one another and vowed to change their lives, vowed to do as the mighty huntsman had decreed. Seated once more on his golden throne high above, the Bodhisattva looked down and sighed. Maybe this good scare will do the trick, he said, wiping his brow with a radiant arm. Let's pray they change their ways. The charioteer god Matali nodded and said, I hope so. All around them, countless stars blazed with light, while the darkness slumbered like a dog by the fire. So that's a version of the story, the Jataka, that appeared in my book, Endless Path, which actually grew out of our initial Jataka Sesshin. So let's look at this Jataka from the ground of practice and Upaya Paramita, perfection of skillful means. First, a couple of Zen quotes. First, from case 25, Blue Cliff Record. The hermit Renge Ho took up his staff before an assembly and said, when the old worthies reached here, why didn't they stay? The audience was silent. He himself answered, it has no power for the way. Case 66, Shoyuroku, Book of Serenity. What about when there's a head but no tail? After all, it's not sublime. And from the commentary on Great Joy of the Ox in that book, my book, Endless Path, Awakening in the Buddhist Imagination. In the Vimalakirti Sutra, there are hints that Mara, the great tempter, is actually an advanced bodhisattva using unimaginable compassion, skillfulness, and strength to test, refine, and develop aspiring bodhisattvas. So, like the Tigress Jataka, the Black Hound is about a leap. In it, the bodhisattva, having worked hard for many lifetimes, has become king of the gods and is sitting pretty at the highest point in samsara, or we might say the 6 realms of unenlightened existence. The Sanskrit word samsara, by the way, means wandering, and it It denotes the world we create with our own wandering, unfocused minds. So he's attained the glorious condition of being not just a god, but king of all the gods. There's no condition higher or more perfect in all conditioned existence. Up there, in that radiant God realm, there are no problems, deficiencies, or unfulfilled desires. But for the Bodhisattva, it's not enough. Something's missing. The vow of the Bodhisattva is to liberate all beings from suffering. Even in heaven, such a vow can't be put aside. It goes so deep that not attending to it rankles. At the start of the Odyssey, the great Western hero Odysseus finds himself in a similar condition. After many trials and dangers, he's landed on the island of Calypso, the goddess of the pretty braids, who wants to keep him there as her consort and make him immortal. After years of danger and difficulty, Odysseus can live with a goddess in a timeless realm forever. And what does he do? He mopes. He wants something more complete. He yearns to return home to his aging wife and maturing son, to time and change, difficulties and challenges. Remaining stuck in heaven is not his cup of tea. Odysseus is already quite Zen, we might say, touching a kind of ancient wisdom that bridges any divides between East and West. William Blake wrote, "Eternity is in love with the productions of time." Zen says, form is only emptiness, emptiness, form. Vimalakirti, the greatly enlightened layman of the Buddha's own time, declares this truth from his sickbed of skillful means. When Manjushri, Bodhisattva of wisdom, asks the cause of his illness, Vimalakirti, whose name means spotless reputation, answers that he's sick because all beings are sick with the sickness of dualities, greed, hatred, and ignorance. If others are sick, I am sick, says Vimalakirti. The realization of emptiness or non-dual reality is the foundation of compassion. Even if we make it to the highest heaven, if anyone is sick, that is, deluded as to their own nature and the nature of all beings, and so continues to experience and cause suffering, how can we truly be well or at peace? In the Jataka of the banyan deer, perhaps you remember, the Bodhisattva is a deer, and he refuses his own freedom and that of his herd until all animals, birds, and even fish are freed from the hunt. He cannot be at peace while others still suffer. Sticking to a personal, quiet, peaceful, blissed out Zen place is not real Zen, for it is not yet the Bodhisattva way. Without skillful functioning in daily life, what's the point? Yet without awakened insight at the core, what can our activity amount to? Upaya, skillful means, emerges out of insight, not sentiment. Wisdom is compassion. Compassion is wisdom in action. Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva of great compassion, has 1,000 helping hands, and in the palm of each is an open eye. The eyes are not an afterthought. Without those eyes, the hands are useless. Awakening is the ground of compassionate action, or upaya. Emptiness needs form. Form equally needs emptiness. It's mutual. Though the Buddha to be is king of the gods and resting at ease up in a glittering, shining, radiant, happy, star-studded, quiet, peaceful, vast, empty heaven, he won't stay there. When 2,500 years ago, Prince Siddhartha set out from his heavenly palace life, he just wanted to know what was out there in the world. The gods of bodhisattvic intent skillfully took the forms of a sick, an old, and a dead person, as well as that of a home leaver, all to encourage the prince to fulfill his vow to awaken for all. It was their upaya, their skillful means, like the Bodhisattva's action in this Jataka tale, their seemingly callous activity was a skillful means to uphold the Dharma. Great bodhisattvas, it said, can take any form to help suffering beings. Wrathful forms, crazy forms, animal forms, beautiful forms, natural forms like rocks, trees, or storms, whatever can work. In times of famine, bodhisattvas become food. In times of illness, they are medicine. They can be lamps, boats, beds, islands of refuge, cows of plenty, while deeply compassionate, advanced bodhisattvas are always skillfully, which means wisely, which means selflessly compassionate. They might not look or act like nice little girl or Boy Scouts. Conversely, they are never cruelly self-centered, egotistic, or greedy. There's no excuse for crude or self-centered behavior in the Bodhisattva way. If anyone tries to blow past their own hurtful or insensitive actions saying, oh, I was just being a Bodhisattva, the best response might be to turn around and run. In our tale, the Bodhisattva, having accumulated an immense store of merit, looks back down on this earth and seeing the dangers still being created by habitual selfishness, he doesn't sit back and say, gosh, that's too bad. Maybe one day they'll get it. I wish them well. No, he acts. He takes a leap, not higher, away from all the trouble and disturbance, but back down into time and change, back into the realm of difficulty. His action emerges from his own wholeness. To suppress it would be to deny what he really knows. The way of the Bodhisattva is the way of selfless insight, which expresses itself skillfully and naturally as compassionate action. However, to think I'm being compassionate and selfless would be to miss the point and opt instead for the essence of unskillful action. The Bodhisattva, king of the gods, was in a rarefied condition, happy, at peace, and free of all personal suffering. Yet he has eyes, ears, and a brain, so he can see, hear, understand, without self-consciously thinking, should I or shouldn't I? He allows conditions to call forth his form. Responding fully, he does what's appropriate. But it's not doing something for others. It's not, here I am all peaceful and the baby is crying, or the neighbor needs a hand, or, well, so I guess I'll attend to it. If he doesn't act, if he blocks or tries to ignore what his own senses and intelligence have revealed, he stands against himself. Relationships, family, community, and vocation are opportunities, not obstacles. They mobilize us, calling forth our best, getting us to take appropriate forms, and so they actively help us mature. We are their beneficiaries. They are our bodhisattvas. Experiencing calm, vast, quiet emptiness in peaceful zazen, as Zen teachers remind us, is only half the story. To be on the path, bodhisattvas endlessly work at perfecting, which means failing and trying again and again, perfecting the challenge of skillfully embodying the way. Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva of compassion, worked for many eons to empty the hells, and in the end, actually accomplished this impossible task. Yet for all that, A moment later, all the hells were again completely filled. Seeing this, the Bodhisattva's head split into 11 heads. His arms shattered into 1,000 arms. The failure was wonderful indeed. With greater skill than ever before, the Bodhisattva now rolled up his 1,000 sleeves and got back to work. The black Hound Jataka shows the Bodhisattva, who is to eventually become our own Buddha Shakyamuni, in the process of actualizing his skillful means, coming forward to help others who, while fundamentally as free as he is, don't yet know it, and so create their own suffering. We should all be as lucky as the citizens of that city who, scared out of their wits, don't just think one day I'll change, but I must change now. Sometimes painful things can be the kick in the butt we need to get us going. In 1953, Yamada Mumen Roshi gave a series of talks on the 10 ox-herding pictures to a group of newly arrived monks at Shofukuji Temple in Kyoto, where he was the abbot. In his talk on the 10th and last ox-herding picture, Entering the Marketplace with Helping Hands, he said, to quote, "You set out in search of the ox, spotted the tracks, caught sight of the ox. Then you caught, tamed, and trained the ox and pushed yourself to the limit in discipline. But the object of all this effort must be to reach this final stage of consciousness. When you have reached the highest awakened state, where the world just as it is the pure land, where you yourself, just as you are the Buddha, then you must throw away the satori, and for the sake of those in suffering and distress, descend to the bottom of society, to the furthest corner of society, and awaken everyone else to this pure land as well. You must give this light of Buddha to everyone else too. This is the ultimate purpose of the 10 ox-herding pictures. With this in mind, I ask you to dedicate yourself to the utmost." Bodhisattvas have endless ways of skillfully manifesting the way. Not all are sweet or pretty, as the Bodhisattva here demonstrates. Still, to make that into a principle to guide our action would be a mistake. Fox Zen is imitative and not genuine. Paying attention, we might see that a gentle touch or a kind word in a certain circumstance might work much better. In the final ox-herding picture, the Bodhisattva doesn't look heroic or fearsome. He's the monk Hotai, stoop-shouldered, bare-chested, round-bellied, with long droopy ears, a goofy grin, a flapping robe, and a bag full of toys and treats, which he freely gives away. Yet though, as the verse says, muddied and dust-covered, how broadly he grins. Without recourse to mystic powers, withered trees he swiftly brings to bloom. And he has a secret. Hotai is himself an upaya, a skillful form taken by the future Buddha Maitreya, who is right now sitting high up in the Tushita heavens, looking down at the mess here on earth, contemplating a vast array of skillful means to save us living beings. One hand is on his chin as he muses on skillfulness. And one leg is down in Western style, like he's sitting on a chair, because he's getting ready to get up and take his leap. In a mere 5,670,000,000 years or so, a snap of the fingers in the endlessness of cosmic time, he'll get to work. But 1,000 years ago, cliffs in China, Tibet, and Mongolia were already inscribed with the words, "Come, Maitreya, come." The whole earth groans for salvation from delusion. Skillful means that is, appropriate means, are endless. The Bodhisattva will keep at it, try and try. She'll succeed at last. And yet, even then, suffering beings will be numberless, and so too will be the need for skillful bodhisattvas and helpful upaya without end. So why does a bodhisattva do it? Why does he or she, when already free, jump back down into the world of troubles, trials, dangers, difficulties? Why take on the grim forms and tough words as in this Jataka, when it could so easily arouse misunderstanding, opposition, even revolt? Maybe those frightened people will just be better armed next time and ready to fight back. Maybe the selfless efforts will go awry. Is there ever a guarantee? There is a word little used in Buddhism and hardly mentioned in Zen, but if you lean in close, you will definitely hear it. The word is love. From the ground of eternity or emptiness, intimacy or wholeness, the hand and foot are not two things. They are one being. If one arm hurts, the other reaches over to rub it. The bodhisattva can't help himself. The bodhisattva of 1,000 arms, each different, is a visual upaya embodying the endless ways of skillfulness, each springing from the wisdom and compassion that are emptiness, empty of self-reference and self-centeredness, but full of love. Some hands hold a bow or spear, a noose or mace, weapons with which to tame, subdue, or overwhelm egotism. Others lift spades, rakes, trowels, hammers, oven mitts, paintbrushes, pens, pencils, computers, cell phones, baby bottles, lunch boxes, pens, pencils, notebooks, and others remain empty, full of as yet unformed potential. How to use all those arms skillfully, which means wisely, remains a fundamental challenge. Without wisdom, the compassionate bodhisattva is useless as a compass without a needle. So how? The bodhisattva on the path towards Buddhahood looks down from on high, sees our mess, takes off his starry crown, whistles up his black hound, black as empty space, black as the middle of the night in which nothing can be separated out and known in a small way, and leaps. That's how he does it. How do we negotiate our own transitions and efforts? Zazen practice, jhana paramita, opens the eye of prajna, but then the bell rings and we uncross our legs, get up and head back out from the Zendo, back into the rooms of our house if we're on Zoom, or out to the street to start our cars and drive away. How do we do that? As this Jataka shows, it's simply how it's supposed to be. You don't stay in your calm, comfortable place. And you don't try to carry that calm place around with you. If you do, you run the risk of closing the eyes in the hand and letting all your own terribly good intentions run amok. Still, must we wait till the eyes in every hand are open? Must we make it to the 10th Bodhisattva stage before we offer helping hands? Well, Hotai is already here, wandering among us, because even Maitreya can't wait. Skillfulness grows by doing what we can as we are right now. We'll fail many times. This is the persevering way of bodhisattvas, of growing up wisdom beings, dedicated to maturing beyond their own self-interest and habitual self-concern. The razor's edge is never far away. Getting up the mountain may not be so hard, is how an old Zen adage goes, but coming down is said to be endless. Getting up the mountain, not so hard, but coming down, that's endless. Now, are there really skillful bodhisattvas who can appear when we need them? Here's a little true story. In 1970, when Rose was pregnant with our son Jake, we were living in backwoods Pennsylvania, about 45 minutes south of Binghamton, New York. One day we drove into town, and while Rose had a dentist appointment, I went off in our old VW bus to handle errands. I came to a gas station where two older gentlemen in worn overalls were in attendance. They also, as it happened, sold used cars. While I gassed up, we talked. I mentioned the upcoming birth. They looked at me, then at the VW, an old, unpadded, uninsulated, rattling, bare metal cargo plane of a van. You have a child coming? They mused. Why don't you take a look at this GMC truck? I did. It was blue and solid and gleaming. Everything about it, from the massive emergency brake to the rows of thickly padded removable bench type seats, exclaimed industrial strength. Take a drive, they said. And I drove away and had visions of plowing with ease up the hill to the old farmhouse we lived in through winter snows, a risky, bouncing pedal to the metal feet in our bus, visions of nomadic family security. How much? I asked when I returned. Flushed with truck power and new hope, they named a ridiculously low sum, plus the wretched old bus. We shook hands and struck a bargain. I'll be back tomorrow. I picked up Rose, spilled the good news, and headed happily home. I drove back the next day, check in my pocket. About 5 blocks from the gas station, there was a loud bang from the engine in the rear. The old VW staggered as if shot, then kept on rolling, but now in a halting, shuddering, groaning, wheezing sort of way. We limped up to the pump where I hit the brakes and mercifully killed the engine, which gave out a final, long, drawn-out, lamenting gasp and died. Then, except for the ticking of overheated metal, there was only silence, an awful silence, as I sat on the peeling leather seat, waiting for the billowing smoke to clear. From the haze of my mind rose a helpless refrain. Up the creek, without a paddle, no truck, not even the old van, cash low, baby coming. The two elderly gents had watched my stricken, labored approach. Now they stepped forward. Well, they said, you brought the bus. Do you have the check? Yes. Yes, I do. You'll still take it? I asked, incredulous. A deal's a deal, they answered. You don't want any more money? I asked in a daze. Nope, said the Bodhisattvas. I feverishly pulled the crumpled check from my pocket, signed it quickly, and handed it over. We finished the paperwork and shook hands all around. I drove off in that heavenly blue, the color of Bodhisattva Guru Buddha, the Buddha of healing, Yakushi in Japanese, blue GMC truck, which not long after drove serenely and safely and reliably down twisting mountain roads in a heavy fog in the middle of the night, so that Jake could be born with one push in the local hospital of Susquehanna, PA. 8 weeks later, we moved to Rochester, loading all our possessions into our big blue truck, later to be known as the Rafe Mobile by the Zen Center, which acquired it from us a year later and got many years of sturdy yeoman service from it. It ran and ran as if it possessed a stout heart under its huge blue hood and not the mere mechanical assemblage of an engine. It ran as if blessed. I wonder if I'd gone back the next day to that gas station and used car lot, what I would have found. Would that lot and gas station now just been an empty field, wind blowing through the long grasses, flags, old guys in overalls all gone, entirely gone. Were those two old guys bodhisattvas? All I know is that they were unusually alert, helpful, and compassionate, way beyond the norm. In fact, they were kind of nuts, and they reminded me of Han Shan and his pal Shide, who hung out on Cold Mountain and were said to be emanations of the Bodhisattvas Manjushri and Samantabhadra. So, are Bodhisattvas really real? What do you think? We'll stop here.